teaching for today. Today's teaching is going to be there's something called bridging practices. And these are practices that are meant to help us take our Aikido practice, our Aikido development from the dojo into the world. And today I'm going to be talking about 3 key bridging practices that are key, that are crucial, that are essential for taking your Aikido into the world, or we could even say for taking your Aikido. I'm going to turn off my mail so I don't get any notifications. Taking your Aikido into daily life. Okay, so these are the 3 key practices, and I even have a bonus practice for you at the end. So let's jump in. First, before I go into the 3 key practices, I want to let's first discuss for a moment, why is it important to take Aikido into your daily life? And we could say, why is it important to take Aikido from the dojo into your daily life or into the world? But we could also say, if you're not, even if you're not an Aikido practitioner, some people are inspired by the principles and teachings of Aikido, and maybe they're too old to get involved with the martial art, or they're not physically fit, or they just don't have the time, or whatever. So they take this. There's a lot of organizational developmental work with Aikido principles, a lot of conflict resolution work with Aikido principles, a lot of leadership schools work with Aikido principles. So that's all fine. That's working with the principles. Taking it from those courses, or taking it from the dojo. Here we are at the Integral Dojo in Tel Aviv, taking it from the dojo. That dojo will be full in just even 1 hour. People are going to start showing up. So how do we take it from here into our daily life? And that's really where it's important, because, if we're not doing that, then Aikido is just another hobby. It's just another activity. It's just another physical fitness. It's just another sport. All good, good, good. It's good to be healthy. It's good to have a hobby. It's good to engage in sports. But as a martial path, Aikido, a way of higher physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual development, it should impact us on a personal level. It should impact us on a social level, and it should impact us on a life level. And that's the purpose of, it's the greater purpose of Aikido. So here's a few of the benefits, not benefits. Here are some of the reasons why it's important to take our Aikido practice from the dojo and into the world. Developing in the dojo does not necessarily translate into the world. So the practice that we do here, Ikkyo, Nikkyo, Sankyo, or the Reiki, we're practicing Japanese forms of politeness. Really beautiful cultural etiquette forms. You learn like how to bow, how to sit straight, how to be quiet, how to be minimalist, how to keep the place clean and neat. All of these things are excellent practices. But then it doesn't necessarily, because we don't live in Japan, and most of us anyways, or many of us I should say, I don't know who's watching, we don't live in a Western culture. We have different ways. Respect is respect, of course, but we don't necessarily work with rigid hierarchies where we're always respecting those above us. So are showing forms of respect. Of course we respect. So these practices that we do here don't always translate into the world. So we need bridging practices, and that's why only with the bridging practice can we take the value of what we're getting in the dojo and bring and actually infuse that value into our life. Remember the basic teaching that I always talk about is that techniques and forms divide by nature. They actually create division, and that's fine. My style, your style, this technique, that technique, this creates more division. And God knows we have enough division in the world. Just by teaching a technique, it's cool, but we're actually practicing division. Not a bad thing unless we're identified there. Principles, on the other hand, principles are universal by nature, and principles unite. Techniques divide, principles unite. So any technique that I'm practicing, Ikkyo, Nikkyo, Sankyo, Kotegaeshi, whatever, pins and rolls and all this stuff, has almost zero application in my daily life. Unless you fall off your bicycle, or unless somebody attacks you on the street, or unless you're in the law enforcement or something. They don't have any application in daily life. But the principles, the universal principles, these these principles that are unifying, they are applicable. You can access them at all times, in all places, and in all circumstances. So techniques divide, but universal principles unite. They are universal by nature, and that means we can take the principle. When I'm practicing centering and connection and listening and grounding, I can take those to every aspect of my life, every relation in my life, every hat that I wear, every kind of label that I have, every way that I relate in the world, I can practice those principles. And then what I'm doing in life will actually be infused with that same benefit that we get in the dojos. So in a way, the principles of Aikido are the agents of transformation. When you practice, when you have a principle-oriented approach, you can do a lot of form, a maximum approach of form, or minimalist approach of form. Styles are different. When you're connecting with the principles are the agent of transformation. That is what makes you grow. By connecting with the principles, who you are will automatically be on this kind of process of growth. So the principles are super, super important, connecting with them. And these are exactly what you can take into your culture, into your styles, into your family, into your office, into all relationships, all times, all places, and all circumstances. And the Aikido at that point becomes a transformational practice. You don't just, if you just practice it in the dojo and you don't practice it in the world, it won't really change who you are. You're going to be collecting new techniques, new styles, new skills, new skill sets, new levels, new grades, and you maybe even getting nice and strong. And then as you get older, those things will start to kind of diminish. And then when your physical fitness is gone, as an old man or old woman, what you collected doesn't really last. But when you're practicing the principles transformationally, they will begin to change you from the inside. And then as we grow and mature, they just continue to grow and grow and grow. And when our physical bodies start to go down, they continue to grow. And that's why they are transformational agents, the principles. They transform the self. They transform all of your relationships, if you allow it with time and patience. And they will transform the world. Richard Strozzi Heckler Sensei, and I've talked about this quite a bit, we both believe that Aikido could be and should be having a bigger impact in the world. And it's not. And I think one of the reasons is that we do not really focus on taking what we learned here. This is a gross generalization. It's not an acquisition. It's not an accusation of anybody. But there's not enough focus on taking it from here and into the world. So this is why it's important to take Aikido into our daily life. And then we can gain a lot of benefit from that. The individual benefit that you gain from Aikido, that'll be translated into your daily life. The relational, the way we create these forms and we perfect ways of meeting in conflict and skillfully staying open and present and connected in that conflict and learning methodologies to help resolve that conflict, and then getting up and do it again, and getting up and doing it again, and getting up and doing it again, we begin to take that into our daily life. And sooner or later, usually sooner, we begin to see that the way we relate with people and the way we relate in the midst of conflict, there's Renee from Aikido in the Netherlands. Hi Renee, nice to see you. The way we relate to people and the way we relate to conflict will begin to transform in the world. So there's a huge benefit to taking our Aikido from the dojo to the world. But you have to have, in a way, additional intention. You have to pay extra attention and even have some bridging practices. Bridging practices is like a bridge that takes from this kind of dojo world here and into my daily life. And today I'm going to talk about the three key bridging practices that will help you take Aikido from the dojo into the world. And remember, each one of these practices is a practice to set a perspective within you. And remember, perspectives must be earned. That perspective, we aren't born with different perspectives. Like for me to take your perspective, I have to earn it. That means I have to center ground and listen and put myself in your shoes and try to get the world from your view and try to get you from your inside. And that's a developmental practice. It's what we're doing in Aikido. So we change uke, nage. Each time we change, I'm putting myself in the shoes of the other person. They're putting themselves in the shoes of myself. And then we're kind of learning. And we're playing these two roles in the model of conflict. But that's a changing of perspectives. And these three practices in one way, these three bridging practices, are also perspectives that has to be practiced and have to be developed and have to be earned. And in that sense, they're a developmental privilege. They're not given to you. They're a birthright to everybody, but at the same time, we have to earn them. We have to work towards them. So developmental practice number one, of course, is one of our key solo individual principle practices in Aikido, having to do with, of course, center. And the first practice the first bridging practice is the practice of from stress to center. I'll say it again. From stress to center. So anytime, let's say I'm a human being, Miles, with a physical boundary, energetic boundary, relational boundaries, cultural boundaries, spatial boundaries, whatever, I'm cool. Nobody's in the dojo. I'm sitting here in front of my little orchid and I got a glass of water and everything's cool. But as soon as people start to come in that door, they're going to be walking into my boundaries. And I'm doing a Facebook Live, for example. And they may begin to kind of create a little bit of stress. I'm worried about them. I'm worried about you guys. And stress comes up. That's natural. Another person driving a car, walking down the street, talking about shopping with your wife, trying to get your daughter to brush her teeth so she'll go to school. All of these things, examples from my life, all of these things that may activate stress in the system. And at that point, it's not the practice is not to do a mean kotegaeshi to my daughter or an irimi nage to my wife. Heaven forbid. That's not the practice. The practice is to go from stress to center. So centering is this amazing, practice that everybody does in Aikido, and it is an intentional practice to turn in. When stress is coming up, everything inside of me wants to go out. Fight, flight, freeze. But especially in relationship. But the intentional practice is actually to stop and turn in. Centering practice is the physical manifestation of mindfulness, and both centering and mindfulness are practices of turning in. Bridging practice number one, we're taking Aikido from the dojo into your life. And you can do this bridging practice in a few different ways. First, you do it with yourself. You do this by, as I said before, turning in. And it's helpful throughout your day, throughout your out of the dojo day. When we walk into the dojo, most people they're cool, they bring their bag, they line up their shoes, they go and they come, they sit down in the straight line, maybe they do some stretching on their own, and they're just ready. That's kind of people get trained and conditioned to be ready for class. We don't do that when we go to work. We don't do that when we go home. God knows when I go home, I take off my shoes, I put down my bag, I take off my coat, and I just plop on the sofa. I play with my kids, and it's not the same intention, and that's fine. We have different ways of being in different places, but when we practice this with the self, it's good to have reminders throughout the day. And there are some Buddhist temples, for example, Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery in France, they have a bell that rings randomly throughout the day. It's just bong. And every time it rings, you'll see everybody, all the people who are practicing, the monks and nuns and the people who live there in Plum Village, they stop, they take a moment, they close their eyes, they turn in, they breathe, they become mindful, feel the body, feel the breath, feel the feet on the ground. This is a bridging practice. Now, we don't have bells throughout our day, but how many times do you walk through a door during the day? A threshold. So, a bridging practice for centering is every time you go through a threshold, just kind of turn in. Every time that you walk into a room, Bob Nadeau Sensei is very good about this. How are you going to enter into a room? Every time you walk into the room, let that walk into the room or walk into your office, even walk into the restroom. Let that be a centering practice. How are you going to walk in? How many times do you sit up and stand up and sit down every day? So let that be your bridging practice. Every time you do this practice, let it be a centering practice. And, like the bell that rings, it can be your cell phone, it can be a notification, an email came in. There's many things that you can set up intentionally to create a bridging practice that normally they might cause a stress, but actually, intentionally, we turn in and we become more centered. Stress to center. We should practice stress to center also in relations with other people, not just with myself, but when I meet other people. So every meeting that you meet with somebody, your kids, your partner, every meeting where you meet and you go to in your business, in your office, when you have a meeting, enter the meeting center. Make an intention to center and enter into that meeting. When you reach and shake hands with somebody, reach out from your center. When you are listening to somebody, listen from your center. These are ways to kind of make sure that the stress is always returning back to center. And we create a bigger and bigger and bigger container for that stress to arise and pass away. So we practice centering from stress to center with ourselves, We practice from stress to center with others in relationship, and then we practice from stress to center in the world. So if you're fortunate enough to live around nature, or if you like to go walk in nature and commune with nature. I live in Tel Aviv. It's pretty full-on city, very active, a lot of energy in the city, but it's also a beach city. So it's easy to kind of go to the beach and you got the whole Mediterranean Sea right in front of you, and it just opens up. Our house is a 5-minute walk from a park where we walk our dog and play with our kids, and that's a place for me to kind of go and commune with nature and really kind of recharge myself with this kind of going from stress to center. Another way to practice stress to center is taking objectivity. Detach and observe what's going on. When you're involved with something, take a moment and just step out of the perspective and look at it from a new view. Detaching and observing is basic mindfulness practice. And the mindfulness practice of Aikido really is the practice of Zanshin. Many of my students, you guys hear me talk about Zanshin all the time. But Zanshin, for those who are not familiar with the word, is a Japanese term. It's out of Zen, but highly used it's used to a large degree in Budo, martial arts, and it means sustained awareness or sustained mindfulness or sustained presence. That I'm present now and I let that kind of linger and linger and linger and linger and linger and linger and linger. Then when the mind slips off and starts thinking and talking and I'm gone suddenly or stress comes up, I practice to kind of come back to my center and I let that linger more. Matsuo Basho, he was the originator, the founder of the haiku poetry in Japan. He has this beautiful poem. He was in a monastery and practicing Zanshin and practicing centering and mindfulness in the bell ring. And he had a moment, he wrote this poem. He says, "The temple bell rings, and when it finishes ringing, the sound continues to come out of the flowers." So practicing mindfulness, the bell rings, boom, I activate my mindfulness, I activate my awareness, I activate my centering, and then when the centering's gone, the centering continues to come out of the orchids. It's really as simple as that. It's the simplest thing in the world, and sometimes it's the most difficult thing in the world. Centering. Remember, our fundamental core practice in Aikido is to move from stress to center. Bridging practice number 1. Taking the Aikido we practice it every time you do a technique in the dojo. You're kind of centering and connecting. Yeah, centering first. We do it all the time in the dojo. Take it into your daily life from stress to center. From stress to center. Bridging practice number 1. Bridging practice number 2. From center to connection. Now, I was saying before about centering, you centering when you're listening and meeting and shaking hands and etc. But this is a little bit different. Centering is taking pure objectivity. Connection is when I start to kind of enter into subjectivity, where I start to feel you. And not just your hands, your legs, like in your hands or your arm or strikes in Aikido, but I start to feel you from your inside. It's an energetic connection that's not connecting with your body from the outside, but it's connecting with you from your inside. So some of the ways to practice, we go from stress to center, and then from center to connection. Some of the ways to practice from center to connection is extend out. Like right now. I'm going to get to everybody's questions a little bit afterwards, if it's okay with you. I'll pull those up afterwards because I want to kind of finish the teaching. Jamie Oliver just had a good question. I'll get to your question in just a second, Jamie. When we practice centering, like right now, let yourself just kind of settle in, centering. And even though this is a virtual meeting, and I'm here in Tel Aviv and you're somewhere, Randall Bonifay, great to see you, my friend. He's in Dallas, Texas. Renee's in the Netherlands. Jamie, sorry, I don't know where you're at. Kelly's in Thetis Island, British Columbia. I can actually energetically, intentionally kind of reach out and connect with you. And you can energetically and intentionally reach out and connect with me. So this practice of connection can happen through virtual space. It certainly happens in actual space. We're practicing it all the time in Aikido. Extending out. So once you're centered, now practice extending. Come out of and extend towards others. Another way to practice center to connection is allow your self-boundary. You might have to do this with a deep breath. Allow your self-boundary to expand. Now, boundaries are good. There's healthy boundaries, and there's sometimes where the boundaries shouldn't be up. There's sometimes where the boundaries should be up. So I'm not talking about being completely without boundary, like in a spiritual experience. That may be cool, but other times in life, there's social boundaries, there's professional boundaries, etc. Have ethical boundaries for sure. Keep those up, but allow your self boundary to expand outward. Like right now, and I'm alone in this room, but there's no Sensei statue over there. There's a Buddha statue, and I can expand my sense of self. There's lots of living plants. There's my orchid over here. I can expand my sense of self out into the space. This is going from center to connection. When somebody walks into that space, or when somebody enters into that space, I want to meet them energetically, fully. And when it's somebody you love, like, I've got a 6, almost 7-month-old baby at home. God, I love her. I just want to I want to eat her up every time. It's like a piece of chocolate, butter, or whatever. I just want to eat her up every time I see her. But imagine somebody who's unpleasant, or there's a challenging or difficult relationship. Can you stay centered and extend out, energetically at least, extend out and mindfully meet them? Again, I'm not saying you should drop boundaries or whatever, but just allow your boundary to expand and mindfully meet what's in the present moment. Another practice for going from center to connection. A friend of mine, Thorsten Shu Sensei, we taught a seminar here together, and he also does Systema. And he's a really skillful guy, a skillful Aikido teacher, 6-dan Aikido teacher, and also with some spiritual depth. And he says it's like, he feels like when he's practicing Aikido and also in life, he feels like he's in an ocean. And that the water on the outside and the water on the inside of him is the same water, and that whatever's coming is just like, imagine your two jellyfish bumping into each other, and they can actually kind of come together. And he says he feels like it's always an ocean. Dan Masisko Sensei has this beautiful saying. He says that he's 70 years old. I think he's a 6-dan, practicing for a long time, many, many years, 40 plus years. And he says at this point in his Aikido and in his life that he doesn't go out anymore. He's centered and open, and he's connected, and everything comes to him. All the Aikido comes to him. He doesn't go out to do a Kotegaishi, or out to do an Ikkyo, or out to do an Iriminage. It all comes to him, and it all just happens. And that's from being profoundly centered, opening up, and then connecting outward. So remember, the bridging practice from stress to center, we've got to go, then we've gone in and we've established the inward center. Now we have to go out. We move from total objectivity to become centered into total subjectivity. And, we do this in Aikido class, and it's a safe space here in the dojo, but now go do that to your life. There's 23 people on the call right now, or on the Facebook Live. So look around the room. Are you alone? Are you in a cafe? Are there people around you? Are the kids over there playing? Are you at work? And just for a moment, open, center, really, do this practice right now. Open up, look. In a moment, somebody's going to walk in that door, and I'm going to, are they going to knock me out of my center? Or am I going to open up and include them and be with them and energetically in this space? It's like, think of one jellyfish in an ocean with another jellyfish in an ocean. And, the boundary is just this membrane, but it's all ocean. And I'm not a jellyfish, and he or she is not a jellyfish. We are ocean, fundamentally. And we're ocean that are having a manifesting as jellyfish. So in a way, I was speaking about this yesterday. It's from a spiritual perspective, we like to have these kind of spiritual experiences. Some people call them a God experience. Miles is having a God experience. Well, in one sense, if you do this enough, then God begins to have a Miles experience and manifest through me, and use that for whatever God, for what, let's just say the great energy, the Aikyo Kame. We'll keep it in Aikido. The Aikido spirit is in me, and the Aikido spirit is in you, and you and I are different. I can connect to you. You and I are different, but the Aiki spirit in you and the Aiki spirit in me is the same Aiki spirit, and that's where you and I are one. So if I'm centered, relaxed, and open, and extend out to you, I can start to experience that. And if I'm centered, relaxed, open, and extending to you while you're centered, relaxed, open, and extending to me, then we actually start to have that experience of both of us being within that Aiki Kami, the Aikido spirit. So bridging practice number 1 is a centering practice from stress to center. The smallest amount of stress, we go back to center. We're trained to do that. We need to do it in our daily life. Bridging practice number 2 is about connection. It's from center to connection. If you're connecting without center, it's not a real connection. It's codependence or something. It's I want something from you, or I don't want something from you, whatever. It's not the same thing. Stress the center, then from established center to connection. Third bridging practice is a reflection practice. And I mention this a lot. Anyways, the students that know me hear this a lot, that learning, there's three aspects to learning for you to really learn something. First is theory. I've been talking a lot about theory. Second is practice. So everything I just said, you got to practice it. I offered you to practice it a minute ago. Sit and just kind of extend out to the space wherever you're at. And if you see people, just see if you can bring them into your energy field or enter into their energy field. That's connection, fundamentally. That's practice. So to learn something, we have to have theory, which I talked about. We have to have practice, which we just did with the connection exercise. And you have to have reflection. Theory is like the map. Practice is like the territory. Reflection is when you stand back, you say, well, look, I read the map, I walked the territory, and this is how it all works together. Rich, I'll get to your question, I'll get to your comment here in just a minute, okay? So reflection practice is key. Now, it's not a Japanese thing. Not that the Japanese don't reflect, of course. They reflect as much as any other human being, more, in some ways more, in other ways less. It's just cultural. But in terms of reflecting that I'm talking about is when you sit down in front of another, you can do this individually, with a journal, for example, but relational reflecting is the best, where you sit down in front of another person and you share. Hey, what was that like for you? This is what it was like for me. And when you're sharing your reflection, I just listen. No opinion, no correction, no judgment. I'm just like, here. You could be full of crapola, but I just sit and listen and I take it in. It doesn't hurt me to take it in. And then I share. And chances are you're going to learn more, and I'm going to learn more through the process. Reflection is super, super important. We don't have too many reflection exercises in the dojo. I try to do it. Certainly in my spiritual workshops, Aikido workshops, we do it all the time. But reflecting from the dojo and taking that reflection into your life, and reflecting from your life and bringing that experience into your dojo is the best reflection practice. It is the best bridging practice of all the practices you can do. And you can do that by simply reflecting, when you sit down at the end of class, maybe intentionally as an exercise, the teacher will say, hey, let's do that. If you're a teacher, I highly recommend sit down face to face. What did you learn? Or sit down face to face. What is connection? Or sit down face to face. What is Aikido for you? Or what is conflict for you? Or what is conflict resolution? Sit down. You just practice for an hour and a half. Now sit down and what is this? Take that practice and ask the question, what is Aikido for you? And how do you take that to the world? For example, 5 minutes, just reflect for 5 minutes. It doesn't take a lot. Then you go, you change clothes, you go home, you go to work, you go have a beer, whatever you do after class. You catch the ferry, get home, boom, tuck the kids in at bed, whatever you do. That reflection stays with you, and it stays with you, and it stays with you, and it stays with you, and that's a bridging practice. So these are the three key practices. Number one is about center, and the mantra is from stress to center. Number two is about connection, and the mantra is from center to connection. And the third key bridging practice that I offer today is reflection practice. If you've got somebody that you can reflect with, even on Facebook, reflect. Don't fight. Don't get into these sometimes silly, arguments on the forums, but just reflect each other in a really healthy, beautiful way. Yes, that's what we're about. That's what we're about. That's what I'm experiencing. If that's what you're experiencing and it's different, then let me see if I can understand that. It's a beautiful practice. It's a wonderful bridging practice. And I am going to ask for one more bonus practice. It's kind of sexy in the title to say 3 practices, 3 key practices. But actually it's 4. So I'm going to say it's 3 key practices plus your bonus practice. Here's the bonus practice. And this is something that my friend Mark Walsh taught me. And Mark Walsh is an embodiment teacher, and he teaches embodied yoga and embodied lots of stuff, embodied leadership, all kinds of stuff. And he calls when he teaches his yoga practices, he calls it the yoga sandwich. And the yoga sandwich is, and we're going to call it the Aikido sandwich. So before you come to the dojo, or when you're walking to the dojo, or you're coming to the door, stop and reflect and say, okay, what is my intention? Look at the life, busy, crazy day, whatever, or boring day, or whatever. I feel like I was couch potato, whatever it was. Reflect where you were, where you're at now, and what you're going into. Just that reflection. That's the top of the sandwich, or the first part of the sandwich. You go in, you train, blah, 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 blah. Whatever you do. You finish, you put on your clothes, you go, you walk out the door, and you walk into the world, and you stop, and you reflect, okay, what did I just do? Where am I at now? How does that make me feel? And what am I going into the daily life? You have a piece of the sandwich at the beginning, you have the practice, the meat or the tofu sandwich or whatever you eat, and then you have a piece of the sandwich at the end. Beginning reflection, practice, end reflection, the daily life. Daily life, beginning of the sandwich, practice, end of the sandwich, back to daily life. So the bonus teaching for today is the Aikido sandwich. So those are your three key practices for taking your Aikido, the three key bridging practices for taking your Aikido into the world, plus the bonus practice. Number one, from stress to center. Number two, from center to connection. Number three, reflection practice, reflecting in the dojo, reflecting out of the dojo. And number four, the bonus, the Aikido sandwich. Take a moment, reflect before you go to class, do class, take a moment, reflect after class. Create a sandwich there, and those pieces of the sandwich are going to act as bridges into your daily life. Everybody, thank you very much. It's been great to be with you again. So keep your Aikido at the leading edge. Wishing you all the best. Bye-bye.